It's your girl Mac Cox here from MA Couture Crafting. Let's talk curves for beginners. Oh my gosh. Curves are scary. I hate them. I want to stay away from them. I actually did some quilts earlier on in my quilt journey that had some curves and it wasn't right. It was, the second one was not right at all, which is unfortunate because it was a really interesting design, but the curves don't match up. It's wrong. I could do a much better job now. With all that being said, I saw a pattern by Kiley's Quilt Room and I had to. It was something about that pattern. It's called Evolve, and basically it goes from a square and it shows a square evolving into a circle. It's a lot of curves, but I had to try it. So what I thought was, I've seen something called a slit and stitch, and basically it's like your drunkard's path kind of quilt ruler. I'll insert a picture, and you just line up the slits and you just stitch it and then it comes out perfectly, sort of. So I tried every way I could. I tried to line them up. I sewed down one side and then sewed back up the other, which is one of the tricks for sewing curves. And it worked. It did work. They came out cool. The quilt lines up. They're actual circles. You can see the curve. They are not perfect by a long shot. I don't sew anything perfectly. I don't know that I ever will, but it does work. But what that means is that I had to take Kiley's pattern. I'm assuming her name is Kiley. I had to take her pattern and make it fit for me. So it was a little bit larger than her quilt pattern, which doesn't bother me at all. But, you know, I had to change some things. So when it came to doing the quilt on the back, which I did end up doing a quilt on the back, I did the Looper, which is super, super, super popular. I think it's by Missmake. And it's a super duper 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 popular pattern, and it's so gorgeous. People do all kinds of things with it, but it's some big old curves. And not only are they huge curves, you have to cut it out of paper. And I do not like paper patterns. I would rather spend hundreds of dollars on her doing some acrylics, because I would do that back pattern on all of my quilts. I am obsessed with that pattern. There's so much you can do with it with these curves, and I was so terrified that they weren't gonna, I was terrified that they weren't gonna line up. I would see people's Looper quilts and I'm like, there's no way that mine would line up. But hey, Kiley's quilt room pattern, I adapted it into a St. Patrick's Day quilt. So the Looper on the back is representative of a rainbow. Get it? St. Patrick's Day and a rainbow. That quilt is going to a very, very special lady who did a lot for me as I was coming up in my early work life. She's born on St. Patrick's Day. Her favorite color just happens to be green, and her eyes are green too. How is that God given with two hands, right? Like, what? So I've always wanted to make her something for her birthday that was green, and this was my opportunity to do so. And that's funny because when quilt people who do the patterns make stuff, how they make it is kind of how it influences you to color it. Like, there are some people who will go way off kilter from where they are. But when I saw Kiley's in green, I was like, yes, this is a St. Patrick's Day quilt. So the way that I made it a St. Patty's Day quilt in my mind is, in one of the blocks, there are some shamrock shoes. And then at the top block, there's a big circle and there's a hidden shamrock in that big circle that you'll see as I'm doing it. And I use my Cricut to cut it out with some fusible on the back and just fuse it down and applique it down. And I love that quilt. The quilt also has a ombre green border. And then to make it even more fun, I put a metallic cotton fabric on the back. So that sucker shines and it doesn't feel horrible. It pretty much feels, it doesn't feel the same as cotton, but it's still soft enough for you to snuggle up with it and cuddle up with it and not have it be all weird. So, yes, St. Patty's Day, Kiley's Room quilt pattern. It's doable, and they're not a ton of blocks. And so it went very, very, very quickly. I was able to knock that out in like 2 days. It was done. Yeah, and then the Looper, the back of the Looper, that could be knocked out in a couple of hours. Cutting it the very first time took me a little bit of time. But really, I should have just folded the fabric in half, folded the pattern in half, and just cut that way. And it would have been much faster. But It comes together quickly. Don't be scared. Definitely pin your intersections, which I'm sure any quilter, most quilters probably already knew to do, but I'm new, you get what you get. But it actually lined up beautifully, and I'm so happy and so pleased with this quilt. So shout out to Kiley's Quilt. Is it Kiley's Quilt Room? Yep, Kiley's Quilt Room, and Missmake's that looper, because I want to put that looper on everything. You guys go on Instagram and look it up, or just Google looper quilt and see what people have done with it. It's just amazing. All right, guys, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Like, comment, and subscribe, and let's get on to how this came together.
So, this is me starting this bad boy. Love that background fabric color, that light gray. So it's not white, but it's, light gray, and I like it. I will probably use it in the future. So this is what a slit and sew, I think it's slit and sew, not slit and stitch, looks like. I cut that so short, I think. Do not think that fit the way that I thought it was going to fit. But I'm cutting a strip, and then you lay this. Oh, maybe it did fit. Did it fit? It did fit. So cut a strip, and then I'm laying it on my rotating mat. Whenever you're doing a curve, I think you should have a rotating mat so that you can not have to be walking around the things. I think it's just easier. I have no idea what I'm doing at this point. No clue why I'm cutting a strip of this. Oh, I think I cut it too small. So it was too small, and so I just went ahead and made lemonade out of lemons. Here we go. Let's grab a piece that is actually the right size. And that's also the reason why I buy a little more fabric, because I know that I'm going to do something stupid like that. So I am cutting right here on this mat, and we're just going to follow the curve. I go nice and slow, and I make sure that my blade is up against that template. I wonder what it would be like to try this technique with a Martelli rotary cutter. People swear by them. I might need to grab a couple and see if I like them. And now I'm just cutting off the excess. So here's the cool part where you cut the slits in, and you see that I'm using those scissors that are the truth. They cut just little snips without any issues. My other scissors were not being my friends. And so now I have little slits, and then you do the exact same thing with the opposite part. But of course, I'm going to use the rest of this fabric and cut more until I can't use it anymore. And here are the blocks. So I'm using the pattern, but not her template. I prefer an acrylic template. Really, I do. So here we go. Let's see what happens when a beginner tries to sew some curves. So we see the slits, and we're going to line them up together. I'm lining that first one up parallel with the piece. I'm trying to line it up parallel. There we go. All right, let's go. I have my gauge down, my magnetic bumper, because I know that even though I have a 1/4 inch foot on that machine, I can sew more than a quarter every time. So I'm just trying to keep it lined up as best as possible. I am not an exact sewer, which is why I like to show you guys this stuff. So if you feel like you don't sew straight enough, or you can't do it and you're scared your quilt won't come out looking cool, trust me, it will. If I can do it, I'm telling you, I do not sew exact. I got all kinds of stuff that buckle and go wrong. But my quilts, when they're finished, oh, they look pretty good. So I'm just going slowly, matching up those slits. One of the issues that I have too is that I'm always rushing to the next project. I have so many ideas, so that's part of the problem. But we're just going to go little by little. This is me doing another one. And I'm showing you guys again, just little by little, until you get all the way around. Now, there are some people who pin at the beginning and the end. There are some people who start stitching from one end, get to the middle, flip it, and sew from the other end. There's a couple of different ways to do it. And this is on the bias, so it has a little stretch, and I use a little bit of that stretch. I pull on it a little bit. And this is what it looks like. Look, they're curved. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. I sewed it, so it's not perfect. But it did come out pretty cool. I changed all the measurements of these things because I am using a template that is not the same, and my blocks I think finish at 4.5 by 4.5, I think. I got another notion, imagine that. This is supposed to be a pressing bar, and it's pretty cool. So I'm laying it on there and I'm pressing my seams open. She tells you which direction to press some of your seams, but some of them I find that I just need to press open. It helps my quilts lay a little more flat. And now I'm lining up the edges and using pins because this is important for this to line up for the illusion that you've sewn a circle. And I'm just going to sew down that seam, and look, it looks pretty good. Let's open this sucker up. I like opening seams. I didn't used to, but lately I really like it. And it worked out. So here's another shape. You can see in the top left corner that that one really has some buckles and bumps to it. But let's see if it'll still work, because I hang out with Jack the Ripper a little bit, but not often. I'm not hanging out with that. Let's just see. Let's just go for it. Plus, I don't like sewing curves, so I don't want to go back and do it again. It's not fun for me. Not at this point in my quilt journey. So I've sewn the middle seams, and now we're checking to see if they match, and they do. I had a little buckling and bobbing here, so I'm just going to square that up, that overhang. It's a lot easier to sew your quilts if you don't have that overhang. If you don't have overhang, it's just, they look cleaner. Even though you're going to change the size of your block, usually I can get it so that it's not so bad. And there we go. It's pretty good. Now this is how I did the applique work. I put some fusible on the back. Ever since I did one of those bienni patterns and learned that you can fuse stuff, I am a fusing crazy person. My issues though is my iron is always too hot, and so I usually mess up the first round of fabric. But I fused it and cut it out with my Cricut with many issues, but eventually I got it. And now we're going to work on the back of the quilt. We're doing the looper, and this is what it looks like when you print it out. I wish that I could buy these in acrylic templates because I am obsessed with this pattern. I love some of the things that I've seen people do. So I trimmed off one side. Do not trim off both sides. Just trim off one side. Pick it, either the one or the two. And now I'm just taking some Scotch tape and I'm taping them together little by little. And it's really good to tape the back too, because you don't know where the pattern is going to overlap another pattern. So just making it as stable as possible is a good idea. And so now I'm adding 3. So the pattern goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as in the rows. So it's 3 sheets to a row. And now I'm grabbing some threads to match so that I can do some applique. Turns out that yellow looked the best. And now we're going to put my little shoes down. Now these shoes are super thick, and it's not double-sided fusible that I used for the bottom. It was just some interfacing. So I'm going to have to figure out how to stick these down. And what I decided to do is grab some heat and bond fabric, double-sided heat and bond. I'm checking the size here to make sure that I cut that out right at an 8.5-inch circle. I used some heat and bond light on the back of my applique pieces. I just cut a few strips and fused it down and then peeled it up and heated it up. I'm trying to find center right now, so I'm just using my fingers to fold this in quarters, and now I know where the center of this block is, and now I can center it. At first I didn't like it because it was super light and you can't tell that there's a shamrock on there, but then I've decided to look at it as though it is a like a secret shamrock, and now I feel better. So like I said, I put some strips of the light heat and bond on the back so that it'll stay for me to be able to stitch it down. I'm using a blanket stitch and my open toe foot here, and I am zigzagging to the left. And then I decided that I wanted to do the inside of this guy too because, you know, it's there. So I did the blanket stitch, but I zigzagged to the right. This is the first time that I've zigzagged to the right as opposed to the left. This is me testing it to see what's going to happen because I was a little bit scared, but That's one thing about this little Singer machine. It is not a top of the line machine by any means. However, it gets the job done. It has so many different stitches, and the ability to change the stitches are just perfect. So I'm getting a lot of good use out of this before I get my dream brother machine. It's funny because they make a machine called the Dream. The one I want is the Luminaire too, though. All right, so I'm zigzagging to the right, and it's all stitched down. Now for this guy, because again, it's so thick, I was like, how am I going to fuse this down? What am I going to do? All the pieces are fused down to there, but I'm like, I tried to heat it up, but because it's so thick, it wouldn't melt that heat and bond. So I put my wool pad over there, flipped it upside down so that none of the pieces moved, and now they're attached. And I just stitched around them with a blanket stitch. Now back to this looper quilt for the back. Let's cut this guy out. And so I'm making this just more manageable by loosely cutting it. I am not taking particular care, but I cut it out with some scissors. And now it's time to start cutting the fabric. I should have folded the pattern in half and folded the fabric in half and just done much smaller cuts. In hindsight, that makes way more sense. But no, beginning quilter, we do dumb stuff, and this was literally dumb. Like, when I'm looking at it now, this just was not smart. But it is what it is. I walked that curve all the way around. Thank God for the looper quilt. They're such big pieces, and the blocks are so huge that it comes together super fast, and there's not a ton of pieces that you have to cut. So to keep this stable on my fabric, I went ahead and threw some pins in there. They advise using pattern weights. That's cool. I've seen somebody use like a stack of quarters. Whatever works for you. But again, you could really cut some time and probably some agony if you just fold it in half. There are some slits that ask you to slit it. I don't know who told me to attempt this, but I'm glad I did. And then you just do the straight sides and sew, and it all works out pretty good. I ended up just pinning the beginning and the end and just easing my way around those corners, and it all matched up. This was a really fast block to put together. I enjoyed it. And here is the front of the quilt right here. You see in the top right, it's kind of like a hidden shamrock. Like, you have to know it's there, otherwise you'll miss it. Thanks for joining me, guys. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.